How do you pronounce that Italian team? Cagliari?
Cagliari.
Cagliari? Cagliari. I'm going to butcher that. Cagliari.
Yeah. Woo. Ooh. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.
Well, hello, FC Dallas Curious fan. Welcome to Third Degree, the podcast, episode 91. I am Buzz Carrick. Peter Welton is not with us today. He's on assignment for the ticket and is not able to record with us tonight. Before I get to the other person that's here with us today, let me remind you that Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer90. 40% off site-wide for all Third Degree podcast listeners with the promo code Third Degree on soccer90.com. That's 3RDDEGREE, just like the name of the website. That's the code. Use it and get yourself some snazzy goods at 40% off, which is a pretty nice sales percentage. All right, the other person with me today is my usual cohort, and that is our own Dan Crooke. Dan, welcome. Merry Christmas to you, my friend.
Merry Christmas to you too, Buzz.
Well, it's an interesting show today, Dan, because we got two early Christmas presents. The first of which is a interview with Paxton Pomykal that from the Kickaround that we're going to dissect. We're going to play back a couple of chunks of it and talk about what it means for Paxton in the season up ahead. And the other Christmas present is that we're going to rehash really quickly. And we'll do this first because there are probably some people that are here for this news first. And that's the Bryan Reynolds sale situation. So it's worth at this point, I think, just sort of giving a rehash of where we are. And I'll sort of sum it up. And there's a little bit of new stuff in here. And then, Dan, you can tell me what your take is on some of this stuff. And basically, the Reynolds situation is down to three teams. There are two teams that have bids in that are still in the works and still in negotiations, and that's Club Bruges. And the second one is Roma in the Italian league in the Serie A. And the third team that's still involved is the first team I reported, which is Juventus. Now, Juventus has not registered a bid yet. And this is one thing I think is a little interesting, Dan, that you and I can talk about a little bit. And that's because Juventus prefers to negotiate personal terms first with the player. And then if the player agrees, then they negotiate a buy for the player with FC Dallas. Roma, in this case, has taken the opposite option, which is they've negotiated a sale price first. And now they're attempting to do personal terms with Bryan at the same time that Juventus is. So it's a complicated situation. And I'm sure, Dan, that you're used to this idea that some clubs do things one way and other clubs do things the other way.
Yeah, I mean, especially when you think like Juventus, they're going to come in if they match terms, they're going to come in and blow whatever else out the water. So, FC Dallas, know by now it's not a case of hey, we're tapping up your player. It's let's just put an authorization on the card, whatever you want, do it.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation too because in a case of a 19-year-old kid like Bryan, there are other factors at play here than just how much money he's going to make. And some of them have to do with playing time and some have to do with comfort level. And I'll give you just one example of what this factor could be. Roma is owned by Dan Friedkin. And a lot of people that are FC Dallas fans may not know who that is. You probably do, Dan. He's the owner of a company called the Friedkin Group, and he's an American. And the most important thing about him is that he owns Gulf States Toyota Distributors, which is the Toyota that sponsors Toyota Stadium and sponsors FC Dallas. So Dan Friedkin, owner of Roma, has a pre-existing relationship with the Hunt brothers. And obviously that creates a level of trust between the clubs. That creates perhaps a level of trust between Bryan Reynolds and that owner if he's had some contact with them through FC Dallas.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny, like the minute details it comes down to from things like that level of comfort of having the familiar accent around, or from having someone like a Weston McKennie who at Juventus, or how many players speak English? Is the club gonna give you some kind of fast track Italian lessons, or what are they gonna help out with in terms of accommodation. So it's, I'm sure one of the things you'll discuss is well, one of the things that's come up about the caveats in the Juventus bid and how he can get playing time but elsewhere. But it kind of circles back, right? It's good in that way to know that Bryan gets to pick the club he goes to, and it not be a case of the Hunts accept a bid, and kind of like try and force the move to somewhere that's not going to be ideal for him in his growth.
Yeah, it's true that any player always can turn down a bid, but if there's only one team bidding, it's a lot less likely that you're going to turn down the one bid if the money is really nice. In this case, Bryan has the choice of 3 clubs at this point that he can pick from, basically.
Well, and also, if the Hunts then turn around and say, Juventus, we accept your bid and your bid only, maybe Roma get put off, maybe Bruges get put off. Yeah. So, like, keeping those players who, Roma's got a lot of money in the bank, but maybe Club Bruges don't. So, keeping that interest is always good, rather than keeping those options open.
Yeah, one thing I can tell you is that Inter Milan and AC Milan, who both were involved and interested, are at this point out. I think it says something about Bryan that Antonio Conte and Paolo Maldini, who run those 2 clubs, were interested in a player that's a young defender. And I imagine that's eye-opening for a young man when those guys are involved. Effectively, because this transfer and these other teams want to get him now, those other 2 clubs were going to have to try and do some things to make something happen in the summer, as I understand it. And that kind of lets them out because this is happening now with these other teams that are ready to make moves, basically.
Oh, imagine that, though. You're a young wing back, and if anybody in the world who has ever watched a game of football could put together their historical World 11 and didn't have Paolo Maldini at left or centre back, those people should never watch another game. For that guy to be interested in you to play for his team, to play, as essentially the counterpart to his historical position, that is insane. That is such a level of trust and belief.
One of the things it'll come down to, I'm sure, for Reynolds will be playing time. He looks at himself, and I think we do too, with the Olympic team in mind, with the national team in mind. Playing time matters. I think it'd be fair to say, Dan, I think you'd agree, that Club Bruges is probably the safest team that's still in it. That's a team where he could walk in as the starter, I would imagine. Roma is probably the middle ground where you have guys there that are around the age of 30 or over 30. So maybe Bryan doesn't walk in and start, but certainly is going to have a really good chance to unseat that player at right back really quickly. So that's probably the best combination of money and playing time, perhaps. And then Juventus, of course, as has been reported in other places, has their club that they've arranged to have Bryan go to for the rest of this season, Cagliari, which I'm probably butchering in my gringo-ness, but that's a place where it's been reported that Bryan will go. And I imagine that not being able to be in the Juventus locker room, even if it's only for 6 months, maybe that's a little bit of a factor, because then you're out of sight, out of mind, when you'd rather be like in Roma, you'd rather be in their team, whether it's starting from day one or just being on the squad and on the bench from day one. That's, there's lots of factors there with those 3 opportunities.
Yes, it's almost kind of like you don't want to be DeAndre Yedlin. How picked the sexy option, which was Tottenham, never played, hurt his national team chance a little bit, and he goes on the loan to Sunderland, and again, out of sight, out of mind. And it was only really that Newcastle came in and kind of saved him to resurrect things a little bit, but still, that was 2 years of his career that were really lost. In those fullback rankings for the US national team, when you've got Serginho Dest, you've got Reggie Cannon, Bryan, you've got even if Nick Lima turns it on now that he's going to Austin again, you've got a ton of guys coming through in those fullback positions, because just with the way the game's going, and the fullback position is kind of gearing more and more towards the American style of athletic player. You can't afford to lose that momentum that he's got right now.
Well, it's going to be an interesting next week and a half. Maybe even we'll know something in the next couple of days. I'm sure they'll be talking through Christmas, trying to get this move done. Dallas is, I'm sure, anxious because they have things they want to do and have already done. And I'm sure these other clubs want to get things ironed up and locked down too. So I think it's going to be done by New Year's, certainly, and maybe even in the next day or two. We'll hear more specifically about where all he's going to go. All right,
you're saying we may get a post-Christmas Huntsman dump?
We might get a post-Christmas Huntsman dump. We'll see how it goes. It depends on how available these people are over the holidays, but you are talking about guys that own clubs. This is the level of these discussions happen when you're talking about this kind of money. Is it the ownership or the head of the organization, soccer-wise, having these discussions, and those guys work year-round around the clock because these things are too much money and too important.
Yeah, so, and I think the transfer window opens, I think, January 2nd this year. So, I mean, we're only a little more than a week away from the business end of it all, where they really want to get these things tied up.
Yeah, everybody wants it lined up before the windows actually go into effect. All right, so if you were here just for the Bryan Reynolds news, hopefully you'll stick around and enjoy the rest of the podcast. Hopefully we're not about to lose half the audience, but we are going to dissect the Paxton Pomykal interview that was on the ticket, where Peter and Andy fawned over Paxton, and there was some fluff in the article, which is all fun and colorful stuff, but we're interested in the mentality and the health. So what we're going to do is we're going to play Paxton's answers. I'll set up the question in short version forms in order to tighten things up a little bit, and then we'll play Paxton's answer, and then Dan and I will talk about.
I can't believe you're denying us some Peter this week.
Yeah, well, it happened. The Paxton interview just happened, and then Peter couldn't join us, so it was like it would have been nicer to have him introduce his own questions, but. We're just going to go with it here. We've never done it this way, so this is going to be a new experience for us as well, and hopefully it will work well. Okay. So the first question Peter asked is really I'm going to paste together the first two answers from Paxton because they're the same question, and that's basically the question was combined. How was your injury, and what was the timeline of it, basically, and is it related to the injury you've had problem the whole time? So here's what Paxton said.
Yes and no. It was a different surgery, but injury wise, it was the next step that I had to take regarding my groin pain that I had been having for since last season, since I had the core muscle repair, and got back from that, went into January camp and tweaked it a little bit there, and then just never really got back to where I was during the season, and still was feeling pain. And the next step in my kind of progression to get back to health was this surgery that I had back in September. Yeah, no, before COVID hit, going into the season when we had our home opener versus Philly, obviously I wasn't completely fit because I didn't have an entire preseason like the rest of the squad, but I didn't have any pain or any injury designation going into the season. I was feeling good and just trying to build fitness back, and I came on as a sub both of those games, and I was feeling really good. And then obviously COVID hit, and we had to kind of switch the way we were doing things, switch the way we were working out. I mean, the whole world got turned upside down. So
yeah, just a little bit.
Yeah. And then when I came back and we started doing the individual kind of quarantine sessions on corners of the field, and then certain sessions I would field a little bit, and then we went to Orlando, and kind of just the rest of the season on and off, I was feeling it a little bit, and then progressively after I got back from Orlando, it just got to the point where the club and I both decided that was going to be for my best interest moving forward, and it was the perfect time to do it, and it made the most sense.
Okay, so to paraphrase that answer, Dan basically said it's the same injury, but it was a different procedure. This is the second procedure that he needed, the next progression. That he was feeling good at one point last season, but when they started ramping up post-COVID, he began to have this problem again. So do you, Dan, have any concerns now after having had this procedure, with his talks that this is what he and the club together decided was important going forward?
I mean, it definitely seems like, that, as you were saying, this is the right way. He had the cam impingement in his hip, which I mean, it's like if you have any kind of long-term injury, right? You favor the other leg or the other arm, and you always kind of develop some kind of issue. Stephen Keel was a perfect example when he had that plantar fascia deal. It screwed up his opposite knee, so they had to he came back from injury, and then they kind of they took him out again so that they could kind of rebalance things and get him going, because otherwise you get that whole, like Mauro Diaz. Every injury he had at FC Dallas and all that time, by the Achilles tendon, was due to the fact that as a youngster he had a hamstring injury, which left him kind of favouring the opposite leg. So, and I remember talking to Christ, I can't think what their names are now. The physical trainer, one of the brothers, who is now at Orlando.
Bazan.
That was it, Profi Bazan. And he talked about, Mauro was a weird case because he was like, I think it was his left side was like super developed and his right side, no, his left side was completely underdeveloped and his right side was overdeveloped. So, everything he's doing is weakening one side or the other. So he was kind of like just a ticking time bomb. And, by taking care of this now at 21 years old, it's perfect. It kind of sets him up for his career and to have hopefully some regular playing time after the last 2 years where it's been hit and miss.
It's funny how these things are all interconnected. I have two stories about the interconnectedness of injuries. I played high school soccer with a guy whose one of his legs was about half a centimeter shorter than the other, and it basically caused him chronic back problems. He was an extraordinary player in terms of the level I was at and probably had a chance to play in college, and that all got ruined by these chronic back problems he had because one of his legs was a tiny bit different than the other, just like Mauro Diaz, well, similar to Mauro Diaz, slightly different. And the other one was, I remember that Ryan Giggs for a long time had back problems, chronic back problems, and they figured out that it was his car. It was his car seat that was causing these problems. They made him get a different car, and his back problems vanished. And it's just funny how tightly wound these guys are and how thin the margins are between performance and non-performance when it comes to something like an injury.
One of the new fads in a lot of the sports is sleep studies. Not like sleep apnea or anything, but the position that players sleep in, the tension they put on one side compared to the other. So, a lot of clubs are bringing in sleep experts to get them all the Tempur-Pedic beds or, some kind of custom molded thing so that they're not twisting their bodies and like you say, starting the day with any additional strain that they don't need when they go through those physical activities.
I need one of those.
Yes.
Okay, let's go on to question number 2. And Peter asked Paxton about how Paxton's mentality is, and here's what he said.
Well, first I'll answer the mental aspect of it. I don't necessarily think that I have pressure to come right away and from day one and kind of be that guy. I mean, I just had a long-term surgery that I'm going to feel better in 2 years than I do right now. So, I mean, I'm not worried. The club and I have talked, and they've put a lot of faith into me, and they're looking forward to me playing next season, and I am as well. Don't get me wrong. I'm super eager, and I'm in a very good place mentally, and I'm ready for next year, and I'm ready to contribute and not be on the sidelines or up in the stands near as much as I have been. But I don't really like to put too much pressure on myself, but I feel like I'm going to have a good year.
Okay, this, for me, Dan, is the answers that I love about Paxton. When he says like this, things like this, and talks like this is what I feel really good about this kid. The idea that he's not going to pressure himself, that he doesn't get wound up, that he doesn't get concerned. He's just cool, calm, and collected. Also, the really interesting thing in this answer was the idea that 2 years from now, he'll feel better than he feels now. So that's kind of like an ACL injury where the time frame is like, just because you're back playing and recovering doesn't mean you're 100% feeling awesome and amazing. So despite the fact he's ready to contribute, it's going to be an interesting year in terms of that side. But I love the mental answer, the level-headedness, the coolness of this kid. He's mature beyond his years, I think.
Yeah, and he's always been mature beyond his years. I mean, ever since first time I spoke to him as a 16-year-old. But it's kind of a perfect... he's the perfect player to be in this situation because he is the guy that is, it's like a almost like kind of like how Mauro Diaz with the Achilles, he came back and people were like, well, he's not the same player. Well, he wouldn't be because similarly that's a 2-year recovery. He's the guy that he's not going to care if people say he's not playing up to scratch. He's going to care what he thinks and what Lucci says. So he's not going to care about what you or I or Peter say on this podcast or what you or I write. If we do the roster rankings, he's not going to give a shit if he's 1 or 46. And we've seen players. I mean, we probably see more of it than a lot of people, but we've seen players who read more into what people say about them, and that affects their belief. And particularly in an attacking position, there's a lot of confidence that goes along with it. And it's great to have someone like Paxton, everything is just water off a duck's back. He knows who he is and where he is.
There was a player once I was pretty friendly with who I wrote he had a bad game, and the next time I saw him, he said, "Man, why did you write that I had a bad game?" And I was like, "Well, didn't you think you had a bad game?" He said, "Well, yeah, but you didn't have to write that."
Back at a club I worked in England, we had a guy who did a report, and then he'd give like marks out of 10, and someone like cornered him in a function room at the stadium. It's like, why did you give me that?
All right. Question number 3 that follows the question about mentality is, how are you feeling physically? And this, again, let's listen to Paxton.
So surgery was back early September, so I'm about 3.5 months out. And a tentative timeline for the surgery I have is similar to an ACL. It's about 6 months till I'm back playing. Whether that means at 4.5, 5 months, I'm already in training, getting fit and whatnot. But physically right now, I'm feeling good. I'm running pretty much every day. I'm biking for cardio and doing a bunch of strengthening work, and I'm literally at therapy every single day. So physically I'm feeling good, and hopefully there is no setbacks, which there hasn't been so far.
All right. Again, there's some interesting stuff in here, Dan, to digest. Original 6-month timeline, which means he's 3 months out from being, quote, back to playing. Now that's a relative term, of course, back to playing. That probably means training on some level. Paxton did say he's already running, biking, and doing cardio. That's fantastic. A big one for this kind of injury, of course, is going to be rotating the sternum and the core, how that's developing, and that's different when you're playing. So, the timeline to actually being in a game will be different than the actual game, the timeline to return to training. But still, 3 months out, that puts us, where does that put us now? March. Puts us in March sometime where he'll be, participating late March, maybe early April. He'll be participating in training at least.
Yeah, it's just kind of disappointing. The only aspect of the timing, it's a little disappointing because it'll be another preseason he effectively misses. He'll be there to be doing some of the strength work and kind of getting himself ready, but he won't be. One thing we've seen, particularly with FC Dallas, is the guys do the Matt Hedges-led pre-camp so that they're all back in kind of fighting shape from day one. And as and he'll be in a position where he can't do that because, when we talk about coming back and that 3 months out from playing is 3 months out from running with no pain or feeling, not from sprinting for 2 hours.
Yeah, let's be clear that the level of fitness for a professional soccer player, game fitness, is very different from just being fit. I mean, there are guys that are perfectly fit that would just get destroyed by the actual level that a pro soccer player fitness is. And in particular, you mentioned Hedges. I know that he told me one time, because I asked him about it, that when the season ends, he takes like a week, maybe 2 weeks off, and then he's back up at the facility working year round, because those guys know that they have to come into camp fit. Like 20 years ago, you would come into camp unfit and then you would get fit in camp. Well, it doesn't work that way now. You got to be fit when you walk in the door because they're working on tactics day one.
Yeah, it's the professionalism's just through the roof. It's not the old days where, I mean, the old days it used to get to the first day of the season and the coach would be asked, do you know your best 11? And the first few weeks, everyone would be like, oh, well, you know, it's still early in the season. No one cares, you know, over Eastern Europe. Oh, no one looks at the table till Christmas. And now it's, when you look at Europe, the Premier League, and the half of the team spend their pre-season making money in different countries, so they don't get a pre-season then, so they do really have to, everyone has to have a physical trainer and be really working on the fitness aspect. The days of not kicking a ball for the first 2 weeks and then kind of scaling things up are 20 years in the past.
Yeah, considering people have lost the Premier League on a point or a goal differential, I mean, every single game, right, is 100%. Oh. All right, question number 4 is the summation of that is, are you in touch with either Kreis or Berhalter? And let's hear what Paxton said.
Yeah, no, me personally, I haven't been in touch with Jason or Greg, but I've been kind of my whole medical team, docs here, everywhere around the country have also been in contact with all of the national team trainers and docs, and making sure that they're in on the loop and just know my progression and know my timetable to come back, so that they have an idea of when I'll be able to potentially be in a camp, or like you said, for all these crazy tournaments coming up. It's going to be a busy year for the national team as well as MLS.
All right, that one's pretty simple, Dan, and this is slightly surprising, actually, that he himself has not talked to Kreis or Berhalter, but for the FC Dallas trainers and docs to be talking to the U.S. national team trainers and docs, that means there's a full integration going on in terms of his management and keeping them in the loop. That's really exciting to hear about that level of contact. Maybe they're not actually sharing the diagnosis, or helping make the diagnosis, but they're sharing the diagnosis and keeping them informed with what Paxton's progress is. That's really exciting to hear.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely good to hear that, the FC Dallas or the care providers that FC Dallas use are in touch with the national team. It's a little less surprising to hear that he hasn't heard from Greg Berhalter. I was always under the impression that he has a relationship of some sorts with Jason Kreis, and that they from times he's talked about how they would talk. But it's sometimes as well, coaches just want to let guys get on with their stuff. I remember when Jesse had his one-time switch from Mexico to the US. No one from US soccer called him. That nobody wanted to pressure him. It was like, hey, look, if you want to come with us, come with us. But we're gonna let you, get on with it, and we're not gonna harass you. So, not too shocking to not hear from coaches, because he's not in coaches' immediate plans, and they're in discussions with, Berhalter is on the phone with his 23 guys he called up in November in Europe, and the entire MLS base camp he's calling up next month here. So.
Well, we do know that Berhalter and Kreis do talk to the coaches of all the clubs in Major League Soccer. So I'm sure he's been in touch with Lucci. I imagine that there's no need to contact Paxton because there's no pressure here. It's when you're ready, then you'll be involved in the discussion at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's move on to the next question. Question 5, and this is the order I've got them written down in. It's not necessarily they're the order they were in the podcast, but there's some stuff I'm cutting out. So anyway, is Paxton affected by seeing his academy teammates being sold? For one, I thought was an interesting question from Peter. And here's what Paxton said in reply.
No, I don't think that they necessarily affect my decision making in the future in that regard. Obviously, I'm very happy for these guys, and I hate to see them go because they're my friends, and I love playing with them, and I've been with them for a long time. So, but obviously, it's a new chapter for them, and they're taking the next step in their career. But the next step in my career right now is just be healthy, man. I mean, I've been out for like almost a year and a half with groin problems and 2 surgeries later. So, I mean, that's the last thing on my mind right now. I think that the next step in my career is just get a full season in, healthy, and be able to be somebody that Lucci can rely on, and not have to sit in the stands or watch from home with COVID like I have been over the past year and a half.
Again, Dan, this is Paxton's level-headedness coming through, that he is not affected personally in the sense that he's going to make his own decision and choose his own path. But, is happy for them, of course. The real takeaway from this answer, actually, and the reason I included it, was because he mentioned specifically that it's basically been a year and a half since he's been hurt. And so his focus for himself right now is 100% on getting healthy and becoming somebody that Lucci can rely on. That Paxton knows that this is the most important thing on his plate. And obviously his vision right now is not where am I going to go someday? It's like, I got to salvage my career, basically, is what he's saying here. That's the way I took it anyway.
Yeah, I mean, we've kind of talked for a couple, or at least maybe we haven't, but people like the Matt Dawes of the world have been talking about, what's his real breakout year going to be? So he needs to have that before we start worrying about Europe. And he's, Paxton's always had a different approach to his career than a lot of guys. Reggie always said he wants to go to Europe. He wants to work his way up and test himself against the best. You've got guys like Tanner who've said, I want 2 years in Major League Soccer, then I want to go to maybe Germany or Holland and then work to Germany. Maybe I'd like to try a season in England at some point. And Paxton's always just been the guy of like, I'm not looking too far ahead. If it happens, that'd be awesome. But, he's never hidden the fact he'd love to play in the Champions League. He's the guy that, and I can't remember if you said it or if Peter said it, but if he has a long career in Major League Soccer and leads FC Dallas to a couple of trophies, he's going to look back on that really happy.
Yeah, that's my impression from talking to him. He's never specifically said that himself, but I have said that about him because that's the take I get. I do know that he did specifically say, and I remember this vividly, that he wants to be at least in the discussion for MVP here. He wants to dominate here before he goes. And that to be at that level and be in those discussions is something he has as a goal. And that's a slightly different, as you say, from some of the other young guys whose eyes all the time are on Europe.
We also have to remember that he's an FC Dallas fan. He was, he was watching Bobby Ryan as a kid. That number 19 jersey means the world to him. You think he wants to, leave Dallas and not be in the greatest of all time discussion with Matt Hedges?
No, I think he would be very happy to be in that discussion. On the other hand, I do think he would not turn down a great offer if it came. But clearly his mind is on right now the next year and being back and healthy.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay, next question. And this is an interesting question because Paxton totally calls Peter on the loaded nature of this question. And that is, what position does Paxton, think that he should play?
That's a loaded question.
Yep. But come on, I got to know what you think your best position is.
It's fair. It's a fair question. Personally, I like playing in the middle. But do I...
As a 6, an 8, a 10, what do you see yourself as?
That's the... So Lucci and I talk about this, and
I'm sure you do.
No, but my role for the team is not necessarily to have a specific position, and I feel like that's something that I've kind of transitioned in my game, and that is something the club really likes about me, is that I am versatile and that they can be able to slot me anywhere and have me play on the field and do a great job in any of those positions. Now, personally, I like to play like the 10 or the 8, but I really enjoy playing winger a lot this year, and even in the past with the national team and qualifiers and stuff, when I was with TAP playing on the wing, I really enjoyed it out there too. So, I mean, right now I'm just looking to get back on the field, but obviously positionally these are conversations we have based on formation, based on the team we're playing, based on what guys are available at that time. And so in training, I train and practice in a lot of different positions that I could potentially even go left wing back if we play 5 in the back. There's just a lot of different ways that I can be used in our style and the way we play. So it's hard for me to like come out and say this is like where I need to be on the field,
All right, Paxton's answer was exactly what we have said it is, which is that he prefers to play centrally as a 10 or even an 8. But then he completely dodges the component of, other than he said he talks to Lucci about all the time, he does dodge the answer of sort of where that might be this next season. But he has admitted that he has enjoyed playing on the wing. He's even talked before, Dan, you can remember, I'm sure, about playing wing back at one point. But the biggest part of this answer for me that I found interesting, that I actually don't like, is that he says the club likes the flexibility he has, that he can play all these multiple positions. And I shouldn't say I don't like it, because I do like that he is flexible, but I'm a big believer in positional focus. I think you become your best by picking one position and become really great at that position. He is so good that he can do multiple things, but I would love to see him like, here's your spot and you're going to be the best this you can be. That's a problem for Jesus Ferreira too. I don't know if you agree with my take on that or not.
No, I'm with you. I mean, it's kind of like Ryan Holland said, right? He's flexible enough that he became a left back, and he became a good left back by playing there a lot. At the same time, if something goes wrong, he is the Band-Aid. So I'm sure like Lucci values it, and particularly coming from the academy background where it, how many strikers of Solar and Texans of FC Dallas turned into a fullback, into a centre back or a central midfielder. Having someone that you can turn to and you can say, hey, look, Acosta just went down. I need you to just fill in. I need you to play the 6 in a pinch or something like that. That is such a great resource to have. But yeah, it would. Particularly when we just talked a minute ago about Paxton wants to be in the discussion at some point in his FC Dallas career for MLS MVP. You're not going to get MLS MVP by being the guy that plays left wing one week and right back the next and central midfield. You're going to be the guy that is playing either as the inverted winger supplying, or as the free 8/10 supplying, or as a dominating centre mid. It's those. I was a little surprised, honestly, to hear him say how much he enjoyed playing on the wing.
Yeah. Well, I hope he enjoys it, because that's where he's going to be this season.
Still
I know.
It's not the case.
Well, Dan, it's a difference when you're talking about Ryan Hollingshead, who's doing this between 27 and 29 and is not in the developmental phase. And let's say compare that to Jesus, who at 18 and 19 is playing left wing, 9, attacking mid, linking mid, right wing. It's like, you're hurting development of these youngest kids by moving them around, I think.
Oh, yeah, and it's definitely shown on Jesus. I mean, we rag on him for maybe being a passenger in some games, but it's not something he's actively doing wrong. It's just, he's playing as the 9 one week, and then playing on the right wing, and then skipping to the 10, and then suddenly he's expected to be like a true Lincoln 8, and the tendencies are so different in all those positions, and what you have to do, that the core principles of his game just go out the window.
Well, that leads us a little bit to the next and the final question we're going to play the answer to, and that is, when will we be able to see you on the field? Is it going to be opening day? Here's Paxton's response.
Like in a match game?
Yeah.
Or like for training?
The match game. Will you be there opening day?
I really hope so. I mean, I'm not going to make any promises with you guys, but obviously the start of the season, too, is a little bit weird right now, because we don't even
know when the season's starting.
Yeah, we don't even know. So whether that's early March or early April, mid-March, whatever it is, I mean, if we're starting early April, hopefully I'll be able to at least be looked at to contend for a spot on the field.
All right, so maybe not quite the answer fans are going to want to hear, that obviously Paxton is correct that we don't even know when the season's going to start right now. It is kind of up in the air. But Paxton says he should be able to compete by early April. So that means he'll be game ready, but likely not game fit or in the swing of things in terms of tactics and team play and all that kind of stuff. So that says to me, Dan, that probably at the beginning of the season, or in the first quarter of the season, maybe, we shouldn't be expecting Paxton to be starting, I wouldn't think.
No, definitely not. And I think it was kind of a... I think there was kind of a dodge in that, because we there's certainly been plenty of reports that Major League Soccer are looking to have the season start in its regular late February, early March time slot. The only thing that would be up in the air is how long preseason is and how it relates to a CBA that may yet still be renegotiated.
I figured there was some MLSPA pushback because all MLS said we're going to start on time, and then MLSPA was like, oh, maybe not. I'm like, yeah, that's because you guys don't want to commit to showing up if that CBA is not done.
Well, I mean, yeah, there's obviously the big thing of MLS wanting to maybe invoke that force majeure clause, and we've certainly seen some stuff from the Players Association where they're like, no, you trust us, you really don't want to do that.
Yeah.
After losing, $1 billion last year.
$1 billion is a lot of money. My big takeaway, you remember from the press conference, was Garber saying that if they had $33 million per team like the NBA does, that still wouldn't be enough to cover the majority of teams' losses on an individual level. And it's just like this year has to have been staggeringly bad across MLS. And this is maybe the one time where the frugality of the Hunts might have played into their favor because of the fact that they don't have these lavish spending numbers that some of the other clubs have.
Yeah, I mean, they're playing largely off the MLS 1.0 game plan, which is, treat every year like you're going out of business. Yeah,
that's actually a thing, Dan. And you obviously weren't here for the origins of MLS, the beginning days of MLS. And I remember I had many conversations at the time, being a soccer guy when there weren't a lot of soccer guys. I got asked all the time by people in the sports business I work with, is this league going to make it this time? Because we'd seen so many leagues fail. And my answer at the time is actually still true today, that it was the league's business model needs to be smart enough to survive not just 20 years or 25 years, but 40 to 50 years, long enough for there to be a cultural change in the United States where soccer becomes accepted. If you can't survive that long as a league, it could still fail even at that point if the cultural shift doesn't happen. And so the Hunts, it's clear to me, have long operated this franchise, not to get off this far off topic, but have long operated this franchise with that in mind, the long-term survivability of 50 years, 100 years of their franchise far outweighing their short-term super spend of some of these other newer clubs.
Oh, definitely. I mean, everyone really draws from what they've known since they've been alive and aware. But when people talk about the established leagues in Europe, your youngest one is Bundesliga, which is only 70 years old, and even before that, that was kind of like a very NFL, NBA kind of deal of it just inherited the mantle from something else.
Yeah.
I guess you could say the Premier League too, which, I mean, in all honesty, was just a rebranding. It wasn't really a new league.
Yeah, a separate business entity was created, but it's the same tier of teams, yeah.
But so it's, MLS is still in its infancy, and 40, 50 years is really when those leagues start to just start to become accepted and begin their own culture, like you say.
All right, so we listened to the Paxton interview there, or the parts that we felt were most important. Dan, what's your big takeaway from listening to Paxton on the Kickaround?
It was good to hear from him. I don't think we heard anything new as such. I think maybe there was some confirmation of the things that we'd known, some confirmation of the things we suspected. It was just good to hear Paxton being positive about it, not, I need to get back playing immediately, I need to be the best player on the team immediately, but very level-headed and what we've known him to be for the past, 5 years.
Yeah, strikingly mature young man. Always impressed when I talk to him or get to talk to him. All right, there have been a couple other pieces of news with FC Dallas. Since we last recorded the podcast, Dan, Bresson and Philippe were both announced as returning for 2021. Good moves, in your opinion?
We'll definitely wait to see. Felipe definitely is going to be... I mean, obviously they're still assessing him, whether they want to pick up that sizable transfer fee and see what it develops into. There's certainly a lot lot of potential for him eventually being a big sale. Brisson, same thing we've really been talking about quite a lot lately is he has a salary of one of the best defenders in the league, when in reality he is a guy that you want to be sitting on the bench.
Yeah, I talked with somebody about him this week, and they were asking me if he's the starter, and I said, well, he was getting paid like it, but I think by declining his option and negotiating. By the way, he is all in on Texas. He just had a baby girl apparently born here, so he called her his little Texan, which I thought was funny on Instagram or wherever that was. But I said to somebody, look, if you go into the start of the season with Brisson as your starting left center back, someone's made a mistake, and we'll get to why we think that won't be the case, but. That position needed an upgrade, and the entire team was affected by that position not being athletic enough. And that's probably something we'll get into more as we get closer to the season comes up. But as you say, go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, even if it's just, it's not even just the athleticism. You want to have someone who can kind of go a bit shot for shot with Matt Hedges and not have those times where the defense gets caught out a little bit. If you go to a back three, yeah, absolutely. You've got a spare guy, throw Brisson at the ball. He can be the aggressor, and he's created goals in that role. But just having two guys who are naturally right-footed, Brisson can play on the right fullback. His entire tendency goes really against the grain of what the left centre back should be. So
yeah.
And we've probably spoken a little more about the nuances with North Texas, where Callum Montgomery really had to kind of learn that position a little bit alongside Breck Evans.
Yeah, it's not so easy to shift right. You would think it would be, but it isn't. And the footedness of the player makes a big determination. And you're correct. If Brisson is a third center back, that's a much more acceptable situation. But then you'd have to add multiple center backs to your roster because you wouldn't have near enough if your base system was a 3-man back line.
Yeah, you'd have to have another starter. You'd have to have depth, which is kind of important now.
Right now, he's your depth right now. And if you go to 3, then your depth is Burgess and Shea, and that's not anywhere near good enough to go into a season if 3-man back line is your base back line. All right, well, that left center back specifically brings us to what is now an announced signing of Jose Martinez, to use a 2-name version of his name. Dan, what kind of player is Jose Martinez, and what do we hope that he is going to provide to this team?
He is a player with some good experience. I think that it's kind of a smart business decision in a way. He's gone to Eibar and just never really gelled there, gone out on loan for 2 seasons, and they're probably picking him up almost on the cheap. A guy who's come through Sevilla's system and then later Barcelona. There's some videos of him from playing for Barcelona B, as you'd expect with anyone who's been in the Barcelona system. Really nice, smooth passer, good at playing out from the back, someone who's going to plug into Luchiball really nicely. Obviously, he was rated highly enough that Barcelona took him with the senior team to the International Champions Cup, and he started alongside Suarez, Messi, and co. in place of Gerard Piqué. Not just with a hodgepodge team, but really with the big money guys.
You're talking about a player that I believe he's 27, so. Without looking it up, I would imagine he came through the youth systems in the Pep Guardiola era.
He started a little bit before that. I can't remember where he's from. Somewhere in Andalusia that doesn't really have Andalusia's kind of a bit of a desert as far as teams go, for the most part. So. He didn't really come through a big academy. It was a lot of very local teams. It was only when he really got on with Sevilla for the Sevilla Athletic, the C or B team. That's when he started to really develop as a professional. So I know there's a lot of reaction in his home area because it's kind of similar to the Brian and Reggie stuff of, look, we've got another one that's going to be a big professional.
Yeah. Well, I would imagine. Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to say, so there's, obviously he's had a little bit of adversity to deal with that, as opposed to someone who grew up in maybe Catalonia and they've just got on with either Espanyol or Barcelona from day one. But he's obviously paid his dues, earned his and earned his spots in teams. It was kind of interesting. I think a lot of Eibar fans were kind of upset because he was in the defence for Granada when they finished 7th and just outside the Europa League places, and Eibar finished 10th in La Liga. Didn't get a sniff, and then this season he sat on the bench for 13 games. So there's some fans there who were kind of calling BS that he didn't even get a chance. There were some very excited Granada fans when they found out that FC Dallas's old kit was basically Granada's kit these days, the red and white hoops. So,
I saw that. Yeah.
It's good to see. One of the things we saw, Bressan's the perfect example. We saw a lot of people in soccer say, he's a good player, he does this, he does that. And we saw a lot of fans say, he's the guy that screwed up, he doesn't have a good reputation. Everything I've seen really about Jose Antonio Martinez Gil has been, really solid. Yeah, would have loved to have seen him got a better chance. So,
yeah, you're looking at a guy that has played in La Liga, also has played at some levels below that. The tapes that I've seen, he looks like he's pretty smooth with the ball at his feet, which is a key for Lucci ball, pretty decent passer. Looks like he has decent enough range and pace. We'll see how he holds up. The top end, can he be as good as Matt Hedges? With time here, potentially. Could he crash and burn? Sure. I mean, you never know about a guy. Maybe he's going to see this as a step back, even though from Eibar, I wouldn't think it is. Maybe he's looking for a chance to prove himself. Maybe that's his goal while coming here. So it's going to be an interesting player to watch because while the defense is really good here, it's not likely to be worse with Martinez, and obviously you could go back to Bressan and get basically the same D you had last year. So is there a chance he can upgrade? That's what we hope. That's what the idea, I'm sure, is. It'll be an interesting situation to keep tabs on to see if he walks in and starts or whether he has to fight his way past Bressan or not, because that will tell us a lot. All right. Go ahead.
So you said he had a pretty good range of pace. I wasn't able to really find too much where I got to see that. I did come across some old scouting reports, and you've seen it as well. You read by two different people, and it's kind of hard to sort of throw a comparison sometimes. But it almost made him sound a little bit slower than Bressan. So I just where I hadn't actually seen the tape to see if that was really true, or someone was maybe almost like scoring out of 10 on a completely different scale, for example.
Well, he has the long, what I saw was a player with long legs and long gait, which sometimes can look like, now I didn't watch him run head to head with somebody, but sometimes a guy that has those long strides like that can look like he's not running that fast. I mean, like Hedges is like that, right? Hedges doesn't look like he's blazing fast, but he certainly doesn't get beat for pace very often. And this guy kind of felt the same way, where he has that extended stride that he can cover a lot of ground in that sense. So that's why I felt like I wasn't worried about pace watching the tape. All right, so the other player that was announced is Jader Obrian. I like to call him Jarth Dader. I think that's funny. Darth Jader. Jader. You think it's an H, a soft H? Jader.
That's what the team's pronunciation guide said, yeah.
Oh, yeah, I should look those up, shouldn't I? Well, I still like to call him Darth Hader. All right, so what kind of player, Dan, did you get to watch any tape? What kind of player is Darth Hader?
I actually haven't seen any tape on him. I kind of was a bit... I did the one time I was like, you know what... These rumors, it's 1 in 10 maybe pans out. I'm not going to waste the time. It's the first one we've really heard too much about, and and then I fell into the busy period around Christmas and just haven't had a chance.
Well, the two videos I watched are both like 4 minutes long. It's all goals and stuff, but he's a very direct, very pacey, very like head down and charging kind of player. He's 25. So this part doesn't match up, but just watching him play stylistically, I got huge Fabian Castillo vibes. Now, he's older than Fabian Castillo. I don't think he's as good as Fabian Castillo could have been. But you are talking about a guy that scored, 25 or 29 goals over the last 2 years, depending on which place you looked up the stats. He did go 9 for 9 on PKs. I mean, 9 PKs is a fair amount out of that number, but he didn't miss one. That's impressive. There's some reports out of South America talk about being a good crosser and that kind of stuff. I mean, the videos I watched, there wasn't a lot of crossing going on. It's basically him blowing by guys with and without the ball. And that vertical component, other than Michael Barrios, that vertical component has been a problem that FC Dallas has lacked since Castillo left. Fafa Pico sometimes brought that component, but often did not. You have to wonder, size-wise, he's short like Barrios, so maybe this is more of a Barrios replacement. We question, because maybe Barrios is starting to lose it a little bit. But anyway, at 25, this is a prime of career player, even though he's a late bloomer. So you hope you're getting a guy that can come in and impact. This is probably going to be the highest level he'll ever get to, I would imagine, already being 25. And I think the best case scenario is that you're going to get somewhere like a 7 to 9 goal contribution from this guy, sort of as a vertical wing kind of player from one side or the other.
So one thing, I hadn't watched tape on him, but one thing I did see was that, primarily through his career, he's played at right wing, but, he will play as an inverted winger on the left. One thing that Michael Barrios has not really had since Fabian Castillo is someone that he can play with. So, he needs like a counterpart that does his game. And I think, honestly, Fafa Pico was the best we've seen with that. Obviously not coming back now. But Obrian and Barrios did have that very small overlap. I'm going to butcher this. It's like Uni Autonoma? I don't know. It was both of their first club, anyway, in Barranquillos, I don't know, whatever the city's called.
Well, if you have a striker on your team who's a little bit slow, who can play like a linking style game where he checks and then lays off, does a little bit of that hold up play, maybe not as a high guy, but sort of as a little false guy, then having wings that can run past that guy is the ideal. I mean, that's the kind of these are the kind of players, whether it be Barrios or whether it be this guy. In our best case scenario, we hope that these are guys that can take advantage of what is more of a static 9 and running off of him. Now, worst case scenario is that the guy's a bust. He's like early Castillo, where there's lots of turnovers. He doesn't know what to do with the ball. There are downsides to these guys. Otherwise, FC Dallas couldn't afford them. You are talking about a player whose transfer value was probably around $500K. These are not DPs. Both these guys are below the DP threshold by using TAM. So we hope that they're going to come good. And whether these two guys come good is probably going to go a long way, Dan, to determine whether FC Dallas can take strides this year.
Yeah, definitely. And, I was going to say, I really wonder if part of this was to get the last bits out of Barrios, having a guy that he knows he's probably kept in contact and has some connection with, you mentioning the strike, with a slower striker having the need to get the wings to kind of blow by. Obviously, Barrios loves to switch wings, and one thing we've seen is that guys he's playing opposite don't necessarily get on the same page as him, and then you get an overload on one side, and unfortunately a place where the opposition can overload on the opposite side. So having someone who maybe is a bit more on the same page, maybe they can get back to that little trio with that you had with Barrios, Castillo, and Diaz, where they were kind of all on the same page. Diaz spreading the ball out one way or the other, the wings switching, and then just having a striker that you can throw at the ball.
Yeah, you hope, too, that these guys, it sounds like possibly, are going to be able to take advantage of Ricarte's through passes, Tessman's through passes. Not sure if Acosta does through passes, but there's some options in the Dallas midfield that maybe this kind of player lends itself to. Speaking of not, go ahead, Dan. I
was going to say Acosta definitely can, because that I the whole 60-yard crossfield bombs as well that Tessman does, that was originally going to be Acosta's role because Lucci was looking for a defender who could do it, and none of them could.
Yeah. Well, Tessman needs to drive those things a little bit more, but that long-range bomb, he might be the best switcher since Ronnie O'Brien in this club, Tessman. If he just once he gets those things a little more driven, it's going to be top tier. I think we all know Tessman's not going to be in this league very long. It doesn't seem. All right. No. Speaking of strikers, there are multiple, as Dan mentioned, multiple other players that have been linked to Dallas. Now, as usual on Third Degree, I will retweet and sort of pass along links and things like that because they're interesting and fun to talk about, but we don't get excited about them and report on them until we actually get something actionable here in the United States. So of these, I think it may be 4 or 5 players now that have been mentioned. One of them's a wing, although that guy's maybe going to Orlando. I saw another guy that's like a 21-year-old striker being linked from somewhere from Uruguay, I think. All these guys are not, until we get something like their club from these last 2 guys announced they're coming, or until we get something else, which brings me to the one player that I've gotten the tiniest little bit of nibble on, and that's the guy from Mexico, the Argentine striker from Pumas, De Neno. He's been reported out the wazoo, and the Mexican press is coming to FC Dallas, and I've got nothing here in the United States on it, except for one tiny little nibble of, yeah, it's legit. Now, so that's not really something actionable or reportable from our end. Now, Dan, I don't know about you. I still think FC Dallas needs needs another striker, needs another 9. Mainly because I don't want Hara to play at all. I want to move on from Hara, and I want a new guy and Pepe to be your first 2 choices. Where are you with the 9 position?
No, I'm right there with you. I would have, my wish list would have definitely been to buy out one of Acosta and Hara. I would definitely like to see Hara become a fit here. I just don't see how he really fits in with the system. He is a guy that looks like he's happy to run back and forth and kind of support and then get up, but he just doesn't have the legs and the age to go with it. And one thing I know you keep saying is he doesn't see Pepe as a threat and he needs someone in practice to push him. And you're completely right when you say it.
Yeah, this is a guy, Hara, who feels that sort of acts like he's the guy, that he walked in and got what he wanted and he got the job without having to fight for it, which is all true, by the way. Chased off the competition, Cobra. I wish that guy would have stayed and fought. And then he has a 17-year-old kid, currently 17-year-old kid behind him, acting like he's going to challenge. Hara's not going to see that guy as a challenge. He basically has no pressure. He has no accountability other than a coach who is barely older than he is and who makes a hell of a lot less money than he does. This is a guy who is, by all the information I'm getting, puts a lot of stress on the locker room, who is frequently late and doesn't take everything as seriously as maybe he should. Now, it was a COVID year. He did have a kid. He did move his whole family up here. All that, sure. Maybe he can reclaim himself in this team, but he's 32. He's 32 and slow. Like, the chances that that's going to get better is basically zip. I mean, I think there's no way all of a sudden he shows up fast and young. I mean, that's not going to happen, right? So I don't see a way forward with Franco Jara as your 9. I think you're not going to be any better as an organization if you don't figure out how to solve or upgrade your center forward position. And if it means giving all the playing time to Pepe over Jara, I am on board with that. I mean, I think they should sign somebody, but if they don't, then forget the 32-year-old guy. Give it to the 18-year-old kid. That's better for me. He plays more conventionally. He plays over the top. His goals expected is legitimately one of the better in the team. I think the kid is ready for more playing time. If I'm stuck with the 2, then just put Pepe in.
Yeah, and you talk about like his locker room presence, and we'll hear people talk about he's such and such is such a good locker room guy. It's important even when you're out in the field because no one wants to pass to the guy that's being a dick every day.
Yeah, you saw the interaction with him and Reto Ziegler with that PK, and then the times after that when Hara at least tried to seek out Reto and vice versa to celebrate after they had the one disagreement. But that moment of disagreement just shows you the disconnect there was in the locker room, and he did arrive and
And the one with Lucci.
Yeah, the one with Lucci, the disrespect of the coach. Now, granted, Lucci could have diffused by moving away. We've rehashed that a tons of time. But you're talking about a guy who showed up in the middle of the COVID and did not ingratiate himself to his teammates by any stretch of imagination.
No, I mean, there's a funny story of someone, like, the whole idea of, like, paying your dues in the locker room at Luton. Luton were playing in League One at the time, won the league, and then brought in a Northern Irish international called Warren Feeney. And the story goes that after a game, I don't think he even played, but he's giving it the big one. Oh yeah, we're the champions. And the team captain punched him, like just laid him out. It's like, no, we played the whole season, we won it. You just got here. Don't act like you've done anything yet. You need to earn your way in.
Wow.
And then he did.
Yeah. Well,
but it's like, it's... Yeah. I mean, hopefully, going through everything in 2020, that's going to kind of, like, really kind of pull him in and make him one of the guys. But, yeah, nobody is... You can't go into a place and be the guy from minute one. There's so many comedies about sports that show you exactly why.
Yeah.
And so on that note, I'm going to go watch Eastbound and Down again.
Yeah. If Franco Jara comes into spring training fit and working his tail off and stepping up and being a leader and trying to pull everybody together, that'll be sort of half the battle. But I don't know that you can overcome the fact that he's 32 and slow part of the battle. Can he be a useful player to the club? Yes. If he embraces the club, he can be. But the bottom line in this business is that winning matters. And this team went from 7th to 6th. That's not getting it done in terms of trying to get deep into the playoffs. I don't think you can look at Hara and saying that's the guy that's going to carry us to the promised land. You need a legitimate 15-goal scorer as a legit frontline 9 to take this team from one of the worst offenses in the league to one of the better, because you have a really good defense, so you don't have to have the best offense in the league, but you have to have one of the top half offenses in the league. You want to be like Seattle when they have both offense and defense in the top 5. That's the goal, and that's what you want to have happen. And I don't think Franco can do it by himself. Even if this is the position I think the club should sign a DP player, the most money that the Hunts can afford level of player. Even if they won't do that, though, you got to get a guy who's between the age of 25 and 30 that can press some level against Franco Jara and make Franco at least concerned that maybe that guy could take my spot if I don't work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as I think you played as a defender, right?
Well, yeah, and both a defender and a holding mid most of the time.
Okay, I played as a defender. I think we're both in the way we talk about the game, more defense first, but you win games with goals and strikers and people that create. That's where the money should go. And that's kind of not where they've really been throwing the money as much. So yeah, absolutely. Even if it doesn't have to be a $10 million guy, but 3-4 million gets you at least some of the way in MLS. And like you say, going from 7th to 6th isn't really much. Yes, they were very close to 4th, but they didn't quite get it. And every team is getting better every year, so you just can't rest on your laurels and expect to suddenly be better because some of the younger guys are a year more experienced.
No, it doesn't just happen like by magic. You have to go out and work for it and make changes and bring in personnel. This is not the NFL or all-American sports where you draft your way to winning. In this sport, you can have an academy impact, but there's a worldwide market and players change teams all the time. And that's where you can go make a difference. And you can go now, you're right. A couple points from being 4th or a couple points from being 10th, in a longer season, those gaps will widen. The bottom line is if the club wants to step forward and make strides forward, there's only a couple positions in which they can do that. Everyone else is pretty much in place. So, and this is for my money as one of them, and because they're spending a lot of money on a guy who's not succeeding. All right, we've butchered Franco Jara enough. I have one more thing I want to talk about, and then we're going to get to one of the things you're going to talk about. And the thing I want to talk about is the post I put up today about soccer numbers and roster numbers, because I think numbers are important. I think it's time for Jimmy Maurer to get the number 1 jersey, and then the other two that are interesting are the new guys coming in. Martinez probably could have 3 or 6. He was 5 at Ibar, and then Jader probably is an 11. That's the number that makes sense. That's available. Any of those, Dan, that you have any problems with?
No, I like that in it you gave 6 to a defender because that's where it belongs.
Yeah, the six is a number that can float all over the place. In the United States, a 6 is so ingrained as the holding mid that we call the position a 6. In England, as you know, Dan, 6 is a center back, or what you call a center half. In Brazil, 6 is a left back, as you can see from Roberto Carlos and such players like that. So I actually suggested that Johnny Nelson can have the 6. Johnny Nelson was 5 at North UNC. Martinez, who's coming in, was 5 at Ibar, and of course Santos is 5 now. So they can't all have the 5. 6 might sit open again for the foreseeable future. I think Johnny Nelson's earned a better number than his 26 if he wants to change because of his playing time. And the other number that I really have a strong opinion about is, we've talked before, maybe not on this podcast, but I've got a whole article about it on the website, that the most important number in FC Dallas history is the number 14. Now, that number is currently occupied by Bryan Reynolds. I combined him, Bryan Reynolds, but he's leaving. We know that. So the 14 is going to be available. And I think that Justin Shea should be the next player to get the coveted, important FC Dallas 14 jersey.
Part of me, my soccer lover himself, thinks of your, Johan Cruyff and the like,
Right?
Creative players. In some ways, I'd like to see a more creative position, and although he does play fullback too, than a centre back getter. But yeah, if you want to really have a true succession and make the number 14 mean as much in the team as it does to you and local soccer historians, much as the same with the 19, that is kind of the direction you need to take it.
Yeah. Now, I totally understand where you're coming from about 14 being Johan Cruyff. And internationally, worldwide, the 14 is often like a intelligent, brainy midfielder. I totally get that. But in this club, starting with Lionel Alvarez is 14, and then Ted Eck is 14, and then Drew Moore was 14, and George John was 14. There's a tradition here of standout, gritty, hardworking, tough as nails leaders in a defensive stance being the 14. And I think that there's a with Justin Shea's potential that they should give him that jersey and let him grow into it, and let him know that there's an expectation with the number 14 here. This is an important number. We're not giving this to you just out of some randomness. We think this is what you're going to be, and that's why I think they should give it to 14, because otherwise I don't really see anybody that's ready for that mantle, unless Matt Hedges wanted it for some reason, but that's not going to happen.
No, sure. And it'd be weird moving Hannah one number just for a season or two.
Well, there is a tradition with the 15 jersey here in terms of midfielders. We had Chad Deering had it, and Mark Wilson had it. Adrian Serio had the 15. There's been a bunch of guys. Ja'Cory Hayes, Jason Christ had it as a rookie. Eric Quill wore 15. Fabian Castillo started out in 15. So there's some good creative 8 to 10 style midfielder in the 15 here. So historically speaking, the 14 being center backs and holding mids, is the slightly different. All right, here's my one last number question controversy for you. Let's say Dallas does not sign a striker, a high striker. Do you let Pepe have the 9 jersey?
Yes, because that would make your Pepe 9 t-shirt make more sense.
I can sell more t-shirts. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think, if you want to, if you don't give your 9 to your best striker, then you just create a situation where you say we don't have a good striker. which
Yeah.
is, I mean, Hara's not going to care. He's got his 29. It's tattooed on him.
Yeah, he wrote it into his contract. Yeah.
Yeah.
If they sign a guy like Dineno, sure, 9, whatever. I'm just saying that if you go into the season, the alternatives are leave the 9 empty and give it to no one. I mean, you let Pomykal have it. He was not even a striker. So, some levels they don't care. So I think there's a point at which I'm okay with giving Pepe the 9 at this point. If they don't sign another striker, that is.
Well, I think as well, I mean, you could kind of compare it to the goalkeeper situation. Now, Jimmy Mauer does not care at all what number is on his back. He could care less if it's 198 so that Felipe can keep his 99. He doesn't really care. But if you leave the number 1 shirt vacant, that sends a bad message that you don't necessarily have belief in your goalkeeping situation. Similarly, if you leave the 9 shirt empty, you don't have belief in your forward line.
Yeah, 100%. And that was the case last year when the 1 became vacated. We said, just wait and see what happens this season. And if somebody wins the job outright, which Jimmy Mauer clearly has, then you give him the 1. And if you go back and you look at his days in the Cosmos, he wore 1 when he was with the Cosmos for the 4 or 5 years, winning a couple, North American Soccer League titles. So, I'm sure that Jimmy doesn't care, but at the same time, I'm sure he recognizes what the 1 means. And I think the club should clearly embrace him and say, here's the 1 jersey that you've earned. Even if he doesn't ask for it, I think it's important. Not to mention that the number 20 is a terrible goalkeeper number because that's the 20, because of Paulo Rossi, who just passed away, is equivalent to the 9. So, it's a great striker kind of number in meaning. So Jimmy needs to be in the 1. That one's, to me, that's not up for debate. I was like, I don't even care if he doesn't care. I'm giving him the 1. He's wearing the 1.
Definitely. Absolutely. So who gets to be, let's go for a really important number. Who's going to play in the number 66 jersey?
Oh, God. Hopefully nobody. That's a horrible number.
That's Trent Alexander-Arnold's number.
The only person that's ever worn 66 at this club is Elaine Suter, who wore it to pay tribute to Route 66 because that's the only thing he knew about America when he came to Texas. I hate that kind of double number. And for me, like if I own this club or owned any club, it's like if I got a 32-man roster, the numbers are 1 to 32, and that's it. I don't like numbers beyond like the top of whatever your roster limit is. They drive me crazy. I know that Alexander Arnold is making 66 popular, but 66, 77, 99, I hate all that stuff. It's like I like to pay homage to the history of numbers and the way soccer, quote, in my mind, should be. These silly numbers drive me crazy. Get off my lawn.
Well, similar to Route 66, Alan Suter had an experience of MLS that was full of potholes.
Yeah. Good one. Step in the hole. Yeah.
No, I mean, I definitely I appreciate like the Brazilians do the year of their birth thing, like Felipe's 99. I wish he wasn't born in 99. I wish he was born in a slightly different year. Trent Alexander-Arnold. 66 is a big thing in England because of the 1966 World Cup. So you're never going to get away from that. But
right.
But yeah, in some ways, the Spanish system of 1 to 25 is rather nice.
Yeah, there's multiple leagues in the world, and Spain's one of them, where the goalie numbers are actually even predetermined. Like goalies have to be 1, and I can't remember what it is in Spain. I think it's maybe 12 and 23 or something like that. Yeah, and there's other leagues too where the numbers are assigned for keepers, which I think is fascinating. So, that's the way I like it and think it should be. But I get it. People feel differently, and that's fine. If you don't care about numbers, that's cool too. That's your bag. I think it's important.
If you don't care about numbers or kits, what are you doing listening to this podcast?
Yeah, those people turned it off already.
Yeah.
All right.
After the Huntsman dump.
Yeah. We lost half the audience after Reynolds. So, Dan, one last thing to talk about on this podcast, and that's the always awesome support local soccer, the Roja Invierno League. And why don't you tell us what's up this weekend?
Absolutely. So, if you are familiar with Europe and particularly the Premier League, you'll know that Boxing Day football is our Thanksgiving, your football. We sit around, drink, watch a ton of soccer on the TV. And the Roja League are trying to get that whole Boxing Day spirit going, even though Boxing Day isn't a thing here. So, 2 double headers. If you're in Fort Worth, you can head over to Martin Field, catch Inocentes versus Denton Estudiantes, who are by far and away the top team in the Roja League currently at 2 p.m., followed by the Chisholm Trail Classico as Fort Worth Vaqueros host Denton Diablos at 4 o'clock. Both of those games, I'm sure, are going to be streamed because Denton and Fort Worth are absolutely fantastic in that aspect. 4 Club on Beltline and Preston in North Dallas. You've got Irving FC versus the incredibly talented, yet results just are not going their way, team of Premier Legends, the alumni team of the FC Dallas Premier's 01 team, which contained Jonathan Tomkinson of Norwich City and Jesus Ferreira. You've still got guys like Judson Burns playing for that team. Really, really good team. Oh, Michael Collodi as well. Really good team. Just amazingly, the results haven't gone their way, and they are sitting on 1 point. Incidentally, Irving FC sitting directly above them on 2 points. So, this will be a big boost to one of them. Followed by that'll be 6 o'clock and 8 o'clock. FC Harrington versus 4-0. 4-0 is Michelle's team. Again, stupid, talented team, a lot older team. FC Harrington, a very gritty, kick the ever-loving shit out of you and beat you in doing it. They are actually the third place team behind the 2 Denton teams.
Kevin Minnie is on that team, the Harrington
Yes,
team.
he is.
Yeah.
4 are a point behind them, just outside of the playoff situation. Really good set of games, actually. Particularly with the Chisholm Trail Classico, really gearing it up to that kind of European Englishy vibe. It'd be definitely worth checking out if you're fed up of your family by that point of the day after Christmas.
Yeah, interesting that Denton is the top 2 positions in the table. It's clear that organization has some ambitions above what they are right now. I don't know how high that might go, but they're definitely putting in a little extra work with that, getting both of their teams topping that table. That's impressive.
Yes, and Denton and Foro actually, they're both, I think, looking to make strides in the women's game as well pretty soon. So, two clubs who could kind of push a little bit. Foro have the Foro Sports Club facility, which may be a bit of a help to them. Denton Diablos, whether it's Texas Women's University, UNT, or they eventually get their own facility, it'd be great to see something happen there.
And a lot of these clubs have youth organizations too. Vaqueros, of course, is free. They use the monies they earn from other things to facilitate that academy. It's not an academy level, but it is a youth program. Denton, I know, has recently started some youth teams. So these teams or organizations are building infrastructure below themselves that are going to help keep them at least MPSL or semi-pro level, and perhaps someday at a higher level. Venue is the key to being anything higher than MPSL. Revenue control, massively important. You see North Texas Soccer Club moving to Arlington for more venue control, for more market access. So those things really matter at that level, and those teams are going to be really interesting to watch to see who goes what direction, because there's a bunch of teams there, and even a few that aren't even in this league right now currently. Whether they be Rados or whether it be Dallas City, that are players in this market.
Well, even looking more at that business side of things, perfect example. I think probably when we had the COVID enforced layoff, I think the best podcast that we had was when you sat down with Damon Gochner from Denton. He knows the business of soccer. He's a marketing guy. He kind of gets how to deal with people and sports and talking about them sending the kids team over to the tournament in Barcelona and stuff like that. They're slowly putting pieces in place that could lead to a very cool situation. And DFW maybe isn't like a true soccer town, quote unquote, but things like this could make it that, could give it the kind of the scene below the MLS level that other markets do enjoy.
Yeah, Damon's a savvy guy, and Denton has its own identity. And even though it's part of DFW, really, the triangleness of it makes it sort of a third sort of little town in a lot of ways, with the university there and all the other things that are there. A great vibe in that town sometimes. So there's a chance to build something there independent from Fort Worth, where there's a chance for somebody to build something, you know, at a higher level, maybe even a USL 1 or USL 2 type level, maybe not that league specifically, but something. You know, there's options here. The Metroplex is so big that, you know, and there's so many people here, so many millions of people here, that there's plenty of market available to run multiple semi-pro or pro at some level teams, even if there's not going to be another MLS team. It's not going to be like London with 15 EPL teams, but there is potential here to grow the game as the game goes forward. It's kind of an exciting time to be a soccer fan in the Metroplex, frankly.
Yeah, and you know, everyone's marketing at a different audience. FC Dallas is definitely more the, hey, let's all have a family fun atmosphere. Well, sorry, don't speak Spanish here. Go away. You know, and Vaqueros, just with the name, Diablos, Estudiantes, it's like, hey, guys, we recognize that, you know, 70-80% of the soccer-loving market in DFW is Spanish-speaking. Let's embrace it. That's just, you know, smart. So, you know, these teams can absolutely exist in the same environment. There's no real... You know, no one's competing for dollars. Yeah, speaking Spanish, there's a lot more Spanish spoken in the FC Dallas locker room than English, and on the training ground too. If you're an English-speaking player, you got to learn Spanish quick to keep up with that on that roster. And if you're an English-speaking member of the media, you're going to speak to about 3 players through the season.
Yeah, it can be tough. Some of the Spanish guys have not learned any English, which is, you know, disappointing in the sense that we'd like to have access to them. Of course, I haven't learned Spanish, you know, so it's as much on me as anybody.
Yeah, we really wasted time during the pandemic not doing that.
Shut up. I don't want to think about that. You sound like my dad telling me I should have learned Spanish. I should have learned Spanish a long time ago. One of the regrets of my life, not learning Spanish.
Same.
All right, Dan, speaking of marketing, it's time to remind you that Third Degree, the podcast, is brought to you by Soccer90. You can get 40% off site-wide at soccer90.com for all Third Degree podcast listeners with promo code Third Degree at soccer90.com. That's the number 3RD degree, which is exactly the same as the name of the website and the podcast and everything else. So go there and get some stuff, make us look good, click through, tell them we sent you. Use that promo code.
And you know who else has been really good? That really lovely Peter Welpton chap and his friend Andy Swift over at 96.7 and 1310 The Ticket on the Kickaround for letting us use that interview.
Yeah, super shout out. Thank you to Peter Welpton for letting us chop apart his interview and put Paxton into our podcast. He by no means did he need to allow us to do that. And he did, and we are grateful. It would have been fun to have him here today to lead into his own questions, but you know, he is busy today with both Christmas Eve with the family, but also you know, during these holiday times, he does more work on the Kickaround, not on the Kickaround, on the ticket. So that has taken up a lot of his time, and he wasn't able to be with us this week. Okay, Dan, thanks again, my friend, for coming on and doing the podcast with me. I appreciate you helping fill up the show a little bit today with your soccer wisdom.
Thank you very much, and enjoy a wonderful soccer-filled Christmas.
Thank you, and Merry Christmas to you, and Happy New Year. And there will be a podcast for New Year's Eve, and we'll talk about that later in the week. You might hear some stuff from us about that. Don't forget that if you do like what we do, you can support us on Patreon at patreon.com/Third Degree. We'd love to have your support. Again, thanks to Pappy Chep for the music. And thank you, FC Dallas Curious fan, for tuning in. We will talk to you again on next week's version of Third Degree, the podcast.
Merry Christmas.
Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast. Third Degree, the Third Degree Net Podcast.